It's real. How to talk to the computer. I mean, I have to say, I was blown away.
Welcome to the Gain Podcast. I have with me today Mr. Craig Smith, the founder of Eye on AI. Mr. Craig, how are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm having a great time in the kingdom.
That's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for joining us on the Gain Podcast. I want to ask you, can you give us a brief introduction about yourself and tell us about Eye on AI?
Sure. Actually, Eye on AI is a late addition to my identity. I am a journalist, and I worked at the Wall Street Journal and then later at the New York Times for many, many, many years. And with the New York Times, I was a foreign correspondent, so I covered a lot of different regions in the world. And actually, I came and wrote about Saudi Arabia many times when I was living in Paris. So I have a pretty good understanding, grounding of Saudi Arabia. And then when I retired, I wanted a way to be able to speak to senior researchers in AI. I had gotten interested in AI, and you can't always promise you're going to have an article published. So a podcast was a great way to give them something back, and it's grown. It's been fantastic.
I couldn't agree more. And what podcast gives you your own outlet to talk
That's
about
right.
the topics you'd
That's
like.
right. Yeah.
We are at the Gain Summit, so we
Yes.
have to talk about Gain a little bit. What has been your experience so far?
Well, first of all, the venue
Beautiful.
just blew me away. I had never been to the Ritz-Carlton. I had never been to the conference center. The stage and staging is spectacular. I want to know who that young boy is who sings.
singer,
Somebody
amazing.
told me he's Italian.
I don't know. I heard him. His name is Omar. I don't know where he's originally from, but his voice was beautiful.
Yeah, just stunning, and the dancing was stunning, and the guests have been stunning. It's just, I know I should give a shout out to Richard Attias,
We should.
who I knew back when I was at the New York Times. We did some work with him, but they've done really a wonderful job of orchestrating the conference. But more importantly, the content has been really interesting for me because I'm interested in different countries and how they're developing AI, and certainly Saudi Arabia is not one that I had focused on, but there's so much money going into AI here. I find it really exciting.
There is a lot of investment in it,
Yeah.
and a lot of results that we've seen very quickly. You've had an extensive career as a journalist. I want to ask you, what sparked your interest in AI? Why decide to create Eye on AI?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting story. I had been living abroad my whole career. My kids grew up without ever living in the United States. I wanted to come back because they had come back for college. I wanted to come back to North America. And since I had been a foreign correspondent, the international desk said, well, go to Canada. It's a foreign country. So I was in Canada driving around and writing stories, and I discovered that Toronto was becoming a high-tech hotbed. This is back at a point when that was actually news. And so I was in Toronto, and everyone kept talking about Geoff Hinton. So I set up a day with Geoff Hinton. Geoff Hinton is the guy who validated deep learning. He's the guy who actually termed the science deep learning with a group of his graduate students, one of whom was Ilya Sutskever, who went on to found OpenAI. So I spent a day with Geoff Hinton, the godfather of AI, uh, drawing on a piece of paper, which I still have, sort of explaining what a neural network was and everything. And I had been so steeped in politics, geopolitics, that frankly I was getting very tired of, because it's the same story back and
Yes.
forth, back and forth. And a light bulb went off. I thought, this is 2017. Deep learning was only validated in 2012, so it was only 5 years in,
Mm.
and I could see this was going to change the world. And so I started going to AI conferences, going to taking online courses. If anyone is interested, Andrew Ng, who I've interviewed many times, he founded Coursera, the massive online open online course company, um, and he has an excellent introductory class to uh, deep learning on Coursera. So I took that. I took, Harvard courses online. It's incredible what you can do online now, and I began going to all of the major conferences. This is a long story, but
No.
quickly,
Oh,
uh, I'd interviewed Jeff, I interviewed Ilya, I interviewed these people, and I was still at the New York Times, but I couldn't promise I was going to write an article when I
you couldn't
interviewed them.
ensure publication.
That's
Yeah.
right, and the New York Times at that time was not really interested. They didn't know who these people
Mm.
were. Okay, you did one story, that's enough. So I started the podcast just as a vehicle to talk to these people. So I could say, I have a podcast, let's sit down and talk. And it's a wonderful way uh, to get knowledge from people who are much smarter than you, because you're in a one-to-one conversation. I do an hour,
Mhm.
and it's been tremendous for me. I wasn't even thinking about the audience. It was just a way for me to have the conversation, and it grew organically.
Yeah.
So
Can I just say you exactly summarized what I've experienced in the last 2 days hosting the Gain podcast?
yeah,
I've sat down with people, like you said, smarter than me in their industries. I've learned about genome, genetics. I've learned
yes,
about mental health and AI. I've learned about fintech,
yeah,
finance, and AI. So it's
yeah,
really wonder. You perfectly summarized the idea of a
yeah,
podcast.
yeah. That's
That's
right.
great.
Yeah.
With your background in journalism and now AI, how do you see the role of media and the evolving of reporting in AI and its impacts on society? What's the role of media and reporting AI?
Reporting on
Mm-hmm.
AI, or using AI
No,
to.
no. What's the role of media reporting on AI? Yeah.
Yeah, it's getting better. The role of media is to translate, which is what journalism always is,
Mm-hmm.
translate complex situations, complex ideas into bite-sized, uh, congestible, or
Yeah.
digestible uh, uh, bits
Mm-hmm.
for the public. So it's you're acting as a translator
Yeah.
or an interpreter, and AI is a very complex science, and so the media's role, what it should be, is educating the public on what it is. The problem is, uh, once AI becomes a popular topic, a lot of journalists who don't know anything about AI, write these stories. It drives me crazy every time I see an article about AI and the illustration is a robot. You know,
Often. You see it often,
yeah,
right?
but they're completely different things. Robotics is one field, AI is another. And sure, you can put AI in a robot, but
It's
uh,
just one aspect of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then of course, particularly in the last 2 years, there's been this threat debate, which is started within the AI community for very specific reasons, but the popular press uh, doesn't really understand the purposes of that discussion. And the purpose of that discussion is to uh, generate more research around safety of
Mhm.
AI, and also to spur regulation, to get the governments looking at what's happening,
Mhm.
because they need to get on board with
Yeah.
regulation. But the popular press, it's like, AI is going to kill us all, and
It's going to take over the world.
that's right, and it's very frustrating because. Yeah, you could paint that scenario, somewhere down the line, just like you could paint many scenarios,
Yeah.
but uh, it's much more complex, and it's certainly not anything imminent. Uh, we're still working on uh, getting large language models to be truthful, uh, rather than spouting nonsense. So it's going to take a very long time.
Mm.
Although it's one of the most exciting things about being involved in the field is the pace of change.
Mhm.
Uh, and I've been watching closely since 2017, uh, and every uh, year or 2 years there's a step change in the technology. Uh, there was one certainly with the creation of the transformer algorithm, which
Mhm.
happened in 2017, and it took a little while. It was Ilya Sutskever at OpenAI to build a model around the transformer algorithm and scale it up, and that's what became the large language models, the multimodal models, uh, ChatGPT out of OpenAI, and Claude out of Anthropic. It all came from that research paper. So it's been fascinating to follow the research. You read a paper that everyone's talking about. That paper was called "Attention Is All You Need," and if people really want to understand the trajectory, they should go back and read that paper.
Mhm.
It's technical, but the other thing I've learned is you can read a technical paper. You just kind of glance through the math, but they're big paragraphs that are explanatory.
Yeah.
Uh, and so you can see how this is progressing. Right now, we're on the cusp of another step change with reasoning agents,
Mhm.
and that's going to be really exciting.
I'm wondering, I'd love to pick your brain on this topic. You've been doing Eye on AI for quite some time now. Have you heard any, or what are some misconceptions that you've heard about AI while you're doing the podcast? I mean, you told me about the threat of it's going to take over the
Right.
world, it's going to kill everyone. What are some other misconceptions you've heard so far?
Well, I don't hear misconceptions from the guests,
Mm.
because the guests
Or
are
working in
are
AI?
working in AI. They're deep in AI. I
Mhm.
hear the misconceptions from my family,
Really?
from from my friends,
Mm.
and things I read in the media.
Mm.
One of the biggest misconceptions today, and actually I've had a debate about this with another podcaster, is that uh, generative AI systems can be used as truth engines. That when you have a debate with somebody, that you can ask this oracle that is AI,
Mhm.
ask, well, which of us is right, and that the AI will give you an answer, and that's absolutely not true. It
Mhm.
depends, right now, and that's what's important about the reasoning agents that are coming. Right now, these large models are only predicting the probability of the next word or next few words in a sentence. And it gives the illusion that the model really understands what it's talking about, but it doesn't. It's just predicting the next token or
Mhm.
or part of a word or phrase in a series. And so you can very easily, with the change of a word, get a different answer. So, uh, the reliability of these models right now is, for some things, it's good, and but
But not for everything. It
not
still
for,
needs
and
some
it's
time.
certainly not a truth engine. Yeah,
Mm-mm. Do you think it's like you said, it kind of looks at the reasoning of each, the future one, right? It looks at
it
the
looks at
reasoning.
the probability.
Okay.
So if I ask about Saudi Arabia, uh, you know, uh, the water uh, issues in Saudi Arabia, it it goes into its knowledge base, into its training data, and it starts putting together sentences based on the probabilities of the words that should come next in that training data. And there's been a lot written about the issues with water in Saudi Arabia. But if I ask it uh, about something for which there's much less data in its training data, it will still come up with an answer based on probabilities, but it may be completely false, or it may reflect a
It might not
very,
be completely accurate.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
In your article for Forbes, you've tackled some philosophical questions about AI, such as what large language models really understand. How have things changed since then, and have you noticed any significant developments?
uh, since I wrote that, certainly there's been change.
How long ago was that, the Forbes article?
This is maybe a year, 2 years
Mm,
ago, maybe a year ago, because there are all kinds of strategies to refine the uh, the the training of the model, to give the model facts through other knowledge bases. Uh, and at the time that I wrote that, there was a lot of speculation about whether models could be sentient,
mm,
whether if you keep making them bigger, because they give this illusion of understanding what they're talking about. If you keep making them bigger, they'll eventually become sentient. They'll know that they're a model. They'll know that you're talking to them, why you're talking to them. Uh, and I spent a lot of time talking to people about that debate. Um, and the current consensus is that you will never get there with simple, I mean, not simple, but with neural networks. That something more profound is needed to get to a real understanding.
mm.
But this is what I was saying about reasoning agents that are coming with OpenAI. Uh, the point is that the AI itself, instead of simply predicting the next word, will be able to look at the data and make judgments about what in the data is relevant, what in the data is uh, more reliable, and it'll be able to make future uh, predictions about what if the outcome of a particular question might be. That's an incredibly powerful thing that's missing from large language models today. Today, they give the illusion of understanding, um, but when they start reasoning, that illusion is going to get a lot stronger. I just in the last 6 months, I've talked to a lot of people about consciousness and sentience, and I don't think any longer that large language models or AI systems will get there with purely with neural networks.
Mm-mm.
The brain is much more complex than simply massive neural connections.
Yeah. We talked about it a little bit in the beginning when you spoke about the GAIN summit, but what's your opinion on the developments in Saudi Arabia and the region, given especially what you've seen in the summit yesterday and today?
Yeah, well, and not only the summit, I came a few days early. I, as I said, I hadn't been here since 20 years,
Wow.
25 years. Uh, and I was really curious. I read about all the changes. Uh, so I really wanted to see the changes. And, and again, being a journalist, I'm skeptical.
Hmm.
How much of this is PR? How much of this is spin? I was very, I considered Saudi Vision 2030. This is from my armchair in New York as a marketing campaign. Yeah, every country has this
Yeah,
marketing.
in all fairness, a lot of people did. And then they came and they actually saw what's happening and the impacts of it.
Yeah, and so uh, socially, the society, I mean, you're a woman sitting here
You
doing
and
a
me having this
pod.
conversation in this
Yeah,
podcast,
it would
this
not
is a
have
result of
happened.
it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Women driving. It's it's I I tell people who I meet, foreigners, people coming to Saudi Arabia for the first time, uh, that you don't realize how fundamental the changes have been, and they really have been. And
Mhm.
from my point of view, I'm sure there are people in every society that resist change, but from my point of view, very positive. The energy
Mhm.
I find among people is very positive. It was not that way uh, in the last time I was here,
Yeah.
and then that's social change. Uh, then I went to Neom.
How was that?
Yeah, it was fascinating
Mhm.
because I emailed everybody I could think of, and I know a lot of people who are connected to the project. Oh yes, I'll have someone come back, get back to you, or oh yes, I'll email the director. Silence, and I understand that. They're trying they're in the middle of something.
Mhm.
They want to wait until things are ready before they have people come look at it. And there's been a lot of criticism,
Mhm.
uh, but it's real. I mean, I have to say, I was blown away by what's happening out there. The amount of activity, the amount of work that's already been done.
Mhm.
And I'm not just talking about, the site preparation for the line. There's so many projects happening
Yeah.
simultaneously out there. And, I spent a lot of my life in China, and I saw China do things that were amazing in a short amount of time that could never happen in the United States. And I could see that in Neom, that here is this barren land, beautiful seacoast that's hasn't been developed or touched, and Saudi Arabia is creating a whole ecosystem out of nothing, and it's really impressive. And then I went to the Red Sea Global projects and talked my way into one of the beautiful resorts,
Wonderful.
and those are
They're
spectacular.
gorgeous.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
gorgeous. They really, the nature there, like you said, it's untouched.
yeah.
It's
And
beautiful.
then here, uh, there's everywhere you go. There's building and there's a lot of confidence. That's the other thing that struck me, because it's very easy to be dismissive or skeptical, and not that
Mhm.
I'm completely uh, sold on all of the projects. The macabre is that how you pronounce
The
it?
murabba, you mean the cube? Is it the
The
cube?
cube, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, it's mind-boggling, but I drove around the site, and the people that I talk to are absolutely confident that it's going to be built. And
Mhm.
I learned in China, uh, when I was a reporter there. Uh, People talked about this is before the Three Gorges Dam.
Hmm.
Oh, it'll never work. It's a huge waste of money. It powers much of China now. And there was a Pudong. I lived in Shanghai, and Pudong on the east side of the Huangpu River. They were building these big, massive buildings, and I remember writing as this smug journalist, what a waste of money this is, and it'll be these empty buildings. No one will ever. I mean, Pudong is like the heart of uh, China's economy right now. So, yeah, I've learned to be humble in my judgment of these huge projects, and it takes will, it takes uh, leadership that is when you run into problems that you don't give up,
Hmm.
and I can see that happening
Yeah,
here.
and the kingdom has both the will and the leadership, I
That's
believe.
right.
We've
Yeah.
seen these projects. I don't know if you've seen Dir'iyah, Tarif.
Yes, I was there
You went
last night,
yesterday.
and
Yeah.
that's another thing. I went there my first time 30 years ago. I took a taxi there
Wow.
and
I want to
got
hear
out.
about that
Yeah,
experience.
it
Seeing
was
it.
interesting. They had it lit. It was at night, and
Hmm.
you could wander around. Uh, but it was a crumbling. Uh,
It wasn't preserved as it is
no,
now,
it
as we
wasn't
see it now.
preserved, and there was nothing around it.
Hmm.
And I went last night. I mean, I was taking videos. I have a friend who worked in Saudi Arabia years ago, uh, to show him that it's just for
Yeah.
people that didn't see it before, they don't understand what it is.
Yeah.
But it's remarkable and beautiful, beautiful. I must
Hmm.
say the taste with which it's done is impeccable.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I remember seeing a photo from 1998,
Yeah,
and then I went back and I saw the same location in 2023, and it was remarkable.
yeah,
This was
yeah,
a wonderful initiative led by King Salman to really
yeah.
preserve it. Taref, is
That's
still
right.
near and dear to his heart.
That's right. Yeah,
But you're right, it was preserved in it was a nice
yeah.
way.
A very
It held on to the culture and the heritage
yeah,
of it.
yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah,
it's perfect.
yeah.
Through the Ion AI podcast that you interview many leading experts in the field, what are some of the most surprising or thought-provoking insights you've gained from these conversations?
Uh, well, there's one. Uh, AI is not a single thing.
Hmm.
There are different schools of AI or different strategies within AI. There's one that has not been exploited quite as much as the original. For those who know the science, the original supervised learning with back propagation. That was the dominant field, and then generative AI has come along, and that is the dominant field today. But there's something called reinforcement learning, and I've interviewed twice a brilliant man named Richard Sutton,
Mm.
who's in Canada. Canada is such a powerhouse in this regard, uh, and he is the father of reinforcement learning, and it was reinforcement learning that, not alone, there was a lot of other tech around it, but it was primarily reinforcement learning that drove the DeepMind's AlphaGo model. And, this is already history, but AlphaGo was the first model that could beat uh, Go masters, the world's best Go players. Go is a game, an Asian game of black and white stones on a grid. And everyone thought that a machine would never be able to play Go because the number of potential moves, I mean, they always say is more than the number of atoms in the universe. I have no
Really?
idea if that's true,
Is it
but
that intricate?
but it's not a simple game,
Mm.
and they used reinforcement learning, and anyone who's interested should go on YouTube and watch the documentary. I think it's just called AlphaGo, that tells the story of this final game with the world's best Go player, a Korean guy, and he's playing this game, and all of a sudden AlphaGo, the machine, puts a stone like up in the middle of the board. And this is a game that has been studied for thousands of years. There's nothing new going on in this game. And if I recall, Lee Sedol was the Go master. He was so flustered, he got up and walked away from the board. He was just, what is going on? And he came back and continued to play, and the machine ended up winning the game, and it was because of that stone that it had placed
Wow.
many, many, many moves before. And so that was an exhibition of reinforcement learning, the power of reinforcement learning, which very simply is a way of teaching anything, including our children, that if you touch a hot stove, you burn your fingers. So next time not to touch that hot stove. That's the reinforcement, and you can create algorithms that do that in the computer. So the power of reinforcement learning is something that it's such a simple idea, but it has such deep implications, and I'm waiting to see what's going to come out of that field of research.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be, again, one of these step changes, just like the transformer-based models were.
I'm wondering, how long did it take the AI model to win the game? I mean, using the stone, how long was that process?
I don't remember. I think it was
Was it a
that
quick
move.
game?
It's a famous thing. I think it was like move 37 or
Wow.
something. You can
It's on YouTube, right?
yeah, or you can look it up, like Lee Sedol, what was that move, and they'll talk about it. And I'm not sure how much longer the game went on. It went on for quite a while. I think it was maybe halfway through the game.
I feel like that would be so frustrating. Imagine the Korean player who has spent so much time
Yeah,
perfecting this game.
exactly. Yeah, he was stunned. He
It's
was really
amazing. It really just shows us
speechless.
there's a
Yeah,
new way of thinking.
that's right.
It's
Yeah.
wonderful. You recently covered the growing field of prompt engineering. How do you see roles like prompt engineering evolving? And what does this say about the shifting nature of work in the AI?
Yeah, and it's funny. I just heard somebody overheard a conversation in the hall talking about this incredible prompt that they had worked out that triggered this wonderful outcome.
Mhm.
When prompt engineering first became a term, uh, a lot of people kind of laughed at it because uh, you're just learning how to ask a question. Uh, but it's as I said earlier, if you ask a model a question, a transformer model, so either a language model or a multimodal model, and you phrase it in one way, you'll get one outcome. If you phrase it in another way, you get another outcome.
Yeah.
So it's a real science in its own right to understand how to build that prompt. And there's another thing that's happening as these models get larger and faster. There's something called the context window.
What is that?
So in the very early days, with ChatGPT, you could only write. It's a little bit like Twitter. You can
There's a word count.
yeah, there's a word count. You could only write 140 characters on Twitter.
Mm,
That is like the context window for these
okay.
models. And as the models got more and more, so your prompt had to be very succinct.
Mhm.
Uh, and as the models have gotten stronger and stronger, that context window is increased to where now you can load an entire book in as the prompt,
Mm,
and so there's and the kinds of things that these models can do uh, really depend on the prompt, on how clear and how uh, concise and how well reasoned the prompt is. So, yeah, it's a real thing. You have to understand how to talk to the computer,
yeah.
and it's getting more and more complex the larger that context window grows. And in already, people are using other models to write the prompts because those models
Mm,
understand the nuances of
really?
prompt engineering better than a human could. And so this is the other thing that fascinates me, that it's no longer one model that if you're doing research you're in an enterprise, you're now working with an ensemble of models that are talking to each other
Mhm.
before and deciding what the best output should be. I had a conversation with Andrew Feldman, who's the CEO of Cerebrus.
Mhm.
They make this wafer scale chip. I'm sorry. Uh, it's instead of they take a loaf of silicon, and you take a very 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 thin slice, and then you coat it with some material, and then you etch uh, transistor pathways, gates, and things onto the chip,
Mhm.
onto the silicon. And in normal computer chip technology, then you cut that up into little pieces and you package them into semiconductors. And Feldman's idea wasn't a new idea, but they succeeded. Is why are we cutting it up and then wiring them all back together?
Mm,
Why don't we just keep it all on the chip? So they have this chip with 900,000 compute cores. Those are the
yeah.
CPUs on the chip, and they can put the memory directly on the chip.
It's amazing.
It really is phenomenal. You should interview him.
I think that's a good idea.
He's a great interview. He's around here, um, and so instead of having to cut up the chip, then you can use this massive chip talking to each other. And this is going somewhere. He was telling me that the use of that power,
Mhm.
which is 10 times faster than GPUs, uh, isn't necessarily going to be used uh, for uh, for consumers or for enterprises. The outputs. So the outputs are called inferences,
Mhm.
right? When you prompt a model and it gives you an output. And for us, it's you ask it a question, it gives you an answer. That answer is called an inference.
Okay.
And he was saying that the consumers of the inferences from these massive chips are not going to be the main consumers are not going to be people. They're going to be other models, and you're going to have these systems of models that are just talking to
Communicating with
each
each
other.
other.
It's
That's
really
fascinating.
fascinating. Yeah.
Wow. I didn't even think of that's even possible. It's amazing. Speaking on prompt engineering, I kind of want to get your insights into this. Funny enough, yesterday I was interviewing an academic and we were speaking about the use of AI in university by students. For example, most common is Chat GPT. Um, do you think it should be banned, the use of AI in
No.
university? Or I had this insight and I want to get your idea on it. I feel like there should be university classes on how
Yeah.
to prompt
Yeah.
AI because this is the future.
That's
What do
right.
you think?
Absolutely. And even in high school,
Mm,
my wife is in education research, and we
okay.
talk about this a lot.
Mm,
And there's this hand wringing about, oh my God, students aren't going to be able to write, they're not going to be able to think. Well, they're going to have to know how to use this technology, and better that they learn early
mm,
and become comfortable and adapt with it, which they will,
mm.
than trying to hide it from them.
Yeah.
So yeah, there'll be some students that are trying to write their term paper just by a prompt, but anybody can spot that.
Yeah.
It's the ChatGPT without some sophisticated prompt engineering is not going to write a great paper. It's obvious that it's been written,
Hmm.
but it's important for young people to begin thinking in those terms and understanding uh, how to interface with these technologies, because that's the future. And I tell people, uh, when was the last time you did long division? You know,
Calculators.
yeah, you use a calculator
Yeah.
on your phone, and these kids are not going to be writing uh, term papers. What's important is that they have critical thinking,
Hmm.
and that they they can understand, high level concepts. And I think ChatGPT or AI or these different models is a fantastic educational tool. So not only to learn how to use them going forward,
Hmm.
but for research, to understand their limitations, understand that you can't accept what they say, that you have to uh, compare different responses. I mean, I use in my daily life, I use three models right now: Perplexity, Claude, and OpenAI.
Hmm.
I ask Perplexity, and then I give it to OpenAI. Is this correct?
Hmm.
OpenAI gives a little bit of a critique. Then I give it to Claude. And after you go through that routine, you're pretty confident of what you have. I do check the source
Yeah.
because Perplexity has that source. But and I mean, I get so excited about it. I tell my kids and my brothers, sit down with it. If there's anything in the world that you want to learn, you've got this
Have access to it.
incredible professor
Yeah.
in front of you that will teach you, and it'll teach you. You can say, look, I don't understand that. It'll dumb it down or make it more simplified, and like, it's just an amazing teaching tool. It really is.
Mm-mm. There was a professor I spoke to. It was day one in the beginning before we started the podcast, and she was telling me the work that she's doing with AI and children,
Yeah.
how she's teaching children the skills of critical thinking using AI by not solving, but giving them options for dilemmas. For example, the child might tell the AI that someone stole my crayon, someone took my crayon, and the AI will tell the child, here are your options. You can either tell a teacher,
Yeah.
you can tell the person how that made you feel, or X, Y, and Z, but it never makes the decision for the child.
That's right.
It tells
That's
them
right.
this is how you're feeling, these are your options, and it's so important at an early stage to build those critical
Yeah,
thinking skills.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
it's way beyond just, hey, ChatGPT, write me an essay. It
Yeah.
goes way beyond that. I think we need to
Yeah.
implement it at an
Yeah.
early age.
And it's one-on-one,
Yeah.
which teachers in the current paradigm, it would be wonderful that we all have our personal tutor, but teachers don't have time to spend that
Yeah.
much give that much attention to each student, and here you can do that.
Accessibility gives people more access to knowledge.
Yeah, yeah,
It's just up to them to kind of navigate through that
yeah,
knowledge.
yeah.
But it's
And
so
that
important.
navigation, that is where the education is needed. You need to teach people how to use it,
Yes.
how to access it. Even in the United States, I talk to my relatives, who have young kids. They're farmers out in the West,
Mhm.
and they don't have the slightest clue about this stuff. It's like, oh, that AI. But
Those robots.
that's right,
That's
those
it.
robots. Yeah, yeah. We're going to take over the world. Yeah.
I've heard that so many times. um, to jump back into your career in media, your career has spanned both traditional journalism and the digital transformation of media, including launching Chinese language platforms for the New York
Yep.
Times. I did not know that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
How do you think AI is reshaping the media landscape, especially with tools like large language models?
Yeah, it's going to be, there's a lawsuit underway between the New York Times and OpenAI.
Really?
And it's going to be really interesting to see where that lawsuit goes, because uh, at the beginning, uh, the foundation model builders, starting with OpenAI, just went out on the internet and pulled in all the data they could. And there's a lot of copyrighted material on the internet. Uh, and so, in that sense, uh, the argument is that OpenAI competes with the New York Times unfairly. That you don't need to read the article in the New York Times. You can ask ChatGPT; it's going to repeat that article back to you. Uh, so I think the copyright issue has to be sorted out. But this is such an evolving field. Uh, I think that will get sorted out.
Mhm.
I think uh, that media organizations will have much broader reach through their use of AI, have much deeper research. I mean, I was a journalist. I'm kind of horrified when I look back at how we reported. And, I'm old, but I'm not that old. I remember during the Iraq War, shouldn't even tell this story, it's so embarrassing, but we went into Basra
Mm.
just with the British forces, and we picked up a Shia clergyman, and he was telling us about uh, Muqtada al-Sadr, that he follows Muqtada al-Sadr, and you could see that whoever this Muqtada al-Sadr was an important person. I eventually met him, actually. But at that time, I had to write a story that night. I have a translator who is Egyptian. The language
It gets
is,
lost in communication, I think,
yeah.
at times.
And it ended up getting into the newspaper. This still just breaks my heart, as Mutawa al-Sadr.
It's a bit of a.
And I kept saying, but he's saying Muqtada, but she's like, no, Mutawa.
Was she a
Right?
qualified translator? Was the translator qualified?
Well,
for
this
him?
is the other thing.
There were no options, maybe. I
Back
guess.
in the day, in an event like that, everyone's scrambling. You just
Yeah. You
grab.
take what you can get.
Yeah, I didn't hire her, but
Mm.
but the people in New York, and they didn't have like an Arabic speaker on the desk. They didn't have uh, a regional expert or an Iraqi scholar like looking at the copy as it's coming in. It's embarrassing that we were really flying blind in a way. And I think we, in the end, and not the weapons of mass destruction stuff, but I think in the end we did a pretty good job in those. But my point is, today that wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
You would immediately, even if there's no cell coverage, with satellite technology, you would have the whole background right
Definitely.
there to write out of. So I think it's really going to deepen and expand
Yeah.
journalism.
But I think it's all about navigating with what you have at the time. In all fairness, this is all that was there at the time during the New York
Yeah,
Times. And
yeah,
you managed with what you had as a journalist.
that's
That's what
right.
we do. But now, I mean, there's so many resources. Like
Yeah,
you said,
yeah,
the options are quite literally open.
yeah,
Open AI, not to make a pun, but yeah.
that's right.
As someone who covers the fast-moving AI sector, do you ever find that with the fast-moving progress that we've seen, I mean, the developments in AI now might be different in a year if we have the same conversation. Do you ever find your audience to be ever overwhelmed by the rapid change in information?
Uh, my audience is very sophisticated there, and if you listen to the podcast, particularly with senior researchers, I assume a lot of knowledge on the part of the audience.
Hmm.
Because if I have Ilya Sutskever, I don't want to ask him what's a transformer algorithm. That's
It's not utilizing the time. Yeah,
yeah,
probably.
that's right. I want to ask him that
You would probably say, ask
questions.
ChatGPT.
Yeah, on the edge. So
Yeah.
Uh, so I wouldn't say that my audience is overwhelmed by the changes. I think they're excited, and I'm one resource uh, that they listen to, but they read academic papers and they follow. A wonderful way to keep up with what's going on is follow the blogs. OpenAI's blog, Anthropic's blog, Google's blog. I mean, all of their research is
Yeah.
discussed in those blogs long before it hits the media.
And it's available. It's
Yeah,
available to
and
the
it's
public. This is the
that's
most
right.
important part. It's accessible. With AI poised to affect nearly every aspect of society, I want to talk about opportunities. Where do you see the most significant opportunities and risks for both individuals and industries looking into the future? Let's just say 5 years.
Yeah. Well, the initial uh, gains on in industry
Hmm.
is going to be very low hanging fruit,
Like,
like automating business processes. Again, with the New York Times used to drive me crazy. You go on a 2 week reporting trip
mhm,
and you're collecting these little pieces of paper, but that's not your focus, your receipts.
yeah,
And then you'd have to go back and and
like
type
manually type them in.
manually type them in. And we had a system where it was a cloud-based system, so it had to ping, and there was very low bandwidth in some of the places I was working. It would take like 2 minutes to get one entry in. So all of that kind of stuff
Mhm.
can be done with
Automated.
AI.
Yeah.
All of the accounting and HR, all of those support functions will be the human labor will be reduced,
Mhm.
and it'll be done much faster. That's a productivity gain, and that productivity gain, when you spread it across an entire economy, is going to be tremendous. It's going to convert into tremendous uh, economic value
Mhm.
and output. So just in 5 years, that's what I see. Because even though the research is moving fast, enterprise adoption is still very slow. If you
Okay.
talk to any big enterprise, what they're doing, they'll tell you that but if you really drill down, they're running pilot projects. They're not quite ready, and understandably, you don't want to bet the farm on a new technology and find out 2 years later that it was the wrong one because there's so many options. So it's going to take time for that to diffuse through industry, and the first thing that's going to come are those productivity gains that will convert into economic value, whether it's that the workers then can do 5 times more than they used to because they're not bogged down with this stuff, or possible also there'll be 5 times fewer employees. I mean, it depends on the
It's
industry.
possible, yeah.
Yeah. On an individual level, I think some of the things that we're talking about, uh, I think it's going to take some time to really understand how to use AI in our daily lives, and that's going to come through companies building products that the average consumer can interface with in a very seamless way. Alexa is an example. I mean, that's an AI product. It's going to get vastly better. Siri on your phone, which I'm sure everybody hates because it never
I'm glad
quite
you said that.
works.
She
Uh,
never hears me, or never
I
chooses
know
not
it's
to.
you're like
Maybe she's off duty. I don't know.
yeah.
She needs a break.
In the car, I'm always yelling at Siri.
This morning, I was asking her to set a timer.
Yeah,
Just ignored
yeah.
me.
But that sort of thing is just going to get vastly better,
Mhm.
and in time, in not very long time, I think more than 5 years, but we're all going to have our own personal AI agents that understands our history, understands our knowledge, understands who we interact with, and is kind of like this little friend that you can talk to.
This
Uh,
would be amazing.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that.
I imagine the mental health and wellness side of it as well. It would help so many people.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, Mustafa Suleiman, one of the founders of DeepMind, founded this company. And I don't remember the name of the company, but he has a model called Pi,
Mm.
Pi. And you can go online and use it, and it's tuned, trained and tuned to have emotional intelligence, uh, so that you and I haven't really followed the applications, who's using it and stuff, but the idea is that there's so many people who could benefit from talk therapy,
Hmm.
uh, who are maybe because of the family uh,
Family
values.
dynamics, or yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to, but if you could sit and talk to an AI and with no inhibition, because it's not going to judge you, it's not going to remember what you told it,
Exactly.
and it could help you sort through. It's kind of like what you were saying with the stolen crayon.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah, it's about accessibility, giving access to
yeah,
healthcare to people that
yeah,
might not have it. And
that's
like you
right.
said, also families. It gives them the privacy aspect. If there are
Yeah,
values that conflict, maybe, or
that's right. That's right. Yeah.
that's wonderful. Actually, I hosted the session I hosted on day one here was on mental health and wellness using AI.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there were both sides of it. The controversial side that's like
Yeah. Yeah.
against it completely, and then the ones for it.
Yeah.
Amazing. I think those are all my questions. Is there anything we didn't talk about? Any point that you want to address in the
Not
podcast?
really, but except to say, congratulations, Saudi Arabia. I really mean that from my heart. It's it's wonderful to see what's going on,
Mhm.
and I'm excited to see. Unfortunately, I'm a little old, so
No, you'll still come back. I want to have the same conversation in 5 years.
That's right,
I
in
want to have
5
the same
years.
conversation.
Yeah.
We'll schedule it in.
Yeah.
We'll tell AI to schedule it in, actually.
That's right. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Craig.
Okay, well, thanks for having me.
I really
and,
appreciate your time and your insights.
Yeah, wonderful conversation.
Yeah, it really was. And I'm
Yeah.
going to watch your podcast as well. Right after this, I'm going to go follow
It's
it.
not as professional as this, trust me.
No, the podcast I'm starting it's not as professional, but it gets the message across. That's the
Yeah.
most important thing.
Yeah.
As long as people can hear it, that's it.
Yeah, and as I don't know if we're still
Yeah,
on,
we are.
but
Yeah.
as I said, and I told my sons this, I tried to get them to start podcasts.
Mm.
You don't have to be the biggest podcast in the world. You build an audience, and it's wonderful. I've got this audience of, I'm not sure how big it is, like 100,000, over 100,000.
You're very
people
humble. It's a big audience.
who listen to me and who email me and comment, and and I don't care about Lex Friedman. I would love to be Lex Friedman. Yeah, I don't know if you know who he
I've heard
is.
of him, yeah.
But he's got his audience. I have mine. There's an overlap, certainly, but it's a wonderful way to have a direct conversation with a large number of people.
And
Yeah,
as you said, you're seeing the impacts, you're seeing the interactions, people are watching and the sharing
yeah,
of information
right.
and opinions
yeah,
just from that podcast.
yeah.
It's wonderful to hear. That's the goal of a podcast.
That's right.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Craig.
Okay.
I appreciate your time. This has been the Gain podcast with Craig Smith, the founder of Eye on AI. Thank you so much.